Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 131 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is...
Max Colville.
How's it going, Max?
I definitely might be buying all the July Criterion releases.
Okay, should we just jump right into it then?
No, we don't have to. It's been a while, John, since we talked.
Yeah, it has been. It's weird.
Yeah.
I was unable to join our last recording, which was great, right?
Yeah, we had Rebecca Long on, and we talked about the Studio Ghibli film Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. And I was joking with her that animation isn't exactly your wheelhouse.
I didn't just bail for that reason or anything. I definitely would have been more of a fly on the wall of that conversation. But you know, I think this is something we always talk about when we're soliciting guests is like, what are you passionate about? Because Max and I will kind of catch up, right? You know, like we want people on here who will talk about something that they really love. And it's just so happened that you and Rebecca have a similar passion for that movie and certainly for Miyazaki, right?
Yeah.
It is a Miyazaki movie.
Yes.
I thought so. I knew it was anime. I just want to make sure I didn't get my notes wrong there.
Yeah, so John, if you didn't listen to the episode, just catch people up. Yeah, we covered the Oscars and stuff like that, and we hit.
you said the word hit. You pivoted off that really fast, which was good.
Yes.
Well, yeah. It's been a while since we talked on air, so that happened, and I'm glad you got to chat with Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca, for filling in. And, let's kind of jump into things now. It seems like we have a lot to kind of cover for a weird, time of the year. There's just a lot of stuff that I think interests us, right? So you kind of mentioned it up front, which was the July Criterion announcement. And July is always a big Criterion month because it's the one of the Barnes and Noble sales. And I guess I assume that's why it is. I can't imagine that every July would have like a fantastic slate, but it does, and so does November, and those are the 2 months they have half off sales at Barnes and Noble. So I assume it's
I
agree
with you. Yeah.
Anyway, I guess this month's slate included. Well, let me ask you this: like, what of the 5 or 6 films that were announced, like, what were you most excited about personally?
You see, like, it's weird because it's like I don't exactly have like the strongest affinity towards Raging Bull, but I can recognize its greatness. So
I think I am on exactly the same boat as you with that movie. I will say that I haven't seen it in probably, I only watched it once and it was in college. So now like 12 or 13 years ago. So I wonder like how differently it'll hit, no pun intended. When I inevitably pick this up. But yeah, 4K Raging Bull on Criterion is an instant buy.
Yeah, and then the other one for me, because I liked it so much and it's coming out of Netflix jail, is the release of Okja. Finally coming to physical media, Blu-ray and 4K. And it's weird, John, because at the time I really loved the movie and like I still think about it fondly. I guess I'll have to like plead with myself to buy it, like more for the special features because it's a tough set.
Well, and also it's on Netflix, right?
Wow, I've bought some Netflix films.
Yeah, no, I have too, but yeah, I was not a big Okja fan when it came out, and I haven't revisited it. Again, another movie which maybe now that I'm a little bit more familiar with Bong Joon-ho as a director, like I'll be more enthusiastic about some beats of the movie, but probably not something I'll buy, but I'd be more inclined to like fire that up and see if it works better for me this, now 4 years or so after it dropped. Have you ever seen Devil in a Blue Dress?
I have not, but it has been released previously, I think by like Twilight Time, that was like a specialty label that released some films that weren't getting the love that they needed, I guess, on Blu-ray.
I would say that is a perfect way to describe Devil in a Blue Dress because it is just a phenomenal movie. I think you'll love it. I cannot wait to get it.
That one's getting a
Just
4K disc as well.
yes, well deserved. I think Carl Franklin is super underrated as a filmmaker, and I was giddy when I saw that. It was not something I was expecting. I don't know if there was like rumors of it or anything of that nature, but Drive My Car is another release. Obviously, everybody was sort of knew that was coming. Virgin Suicides is a Blu-ray to 4K now upgrade, right? That had
Yep.
been released previously. David Lean's Summertime, I believe, was in the collection previously. Let me see. I
That
haven't
was
seen
good.
that movie, but it
No.
sounds very good.
Yeah, it's Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah, it's Spine number 22, so it's just getting an upgrade now. Final, for after a long time. But yeah, for me, I think Devil in a Blue Dress was just such a pleasant surprise, and then Raging Bull is sort of like one of those iconic, like truly like level up iconic movies that belongs in any sort of collector's shelf.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's like one of those cornerstone films, right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and nice to see more Scorsese join the collection. We had the Irishman, and with the Scorsese and the Okja, the Netflix sort of crossover there on that movie. But the Irishman's in there. Last Temptation of Christ. Obviously, there's the Scorsese World Cinema Project box sets. I don't
There's
know if he
also
directed those movies, but he's heavily
the
involved in restoring them.
the Daniel Day-Lewis romance
Oh,
film.
Age of Innocence, yeah,
Yeah.
and then they released the Scorsese shorts
Yeah.
um,
So yeah,
uh,
he's in the collection bunch.
collection. Yeah, yeah. And any other Scorsese movies you'd love to see join?
Um,
After Hours has been rumored forever. I feel like.
yeah, I'd like that. I mean, like, I guess if you're talking like you'd always want to see, like, you'd maybe want Taxi Driver in the collection just because it's his other like super iconic film. I mean, like, I think like the studios that own like Taxi Driver and Goodfellas probably are happy with just putting releases out of those, and
I would think so.
those are still commercially pretty viable films. And
It feels like Mean Streets probably would be a deserving. It was like his big breakthrough movie,
yeah.
and just as like for an underrated title, and it'll tie back to something we're going to talk about more later. But love to see some attention to given to Bringing Out the Dead. Um, so anyway, just some ideas. If you're listening, Criterion, you could also send us any of this stuff if you're so inclined. Um, so yeah, we're excited for that. Other big news, I guess, of the week was the drop of at least most of the titles for the Cannes Film Festival. And we've learned presumably all the competition titles. I mean, every once in a while they'll add something like late. There's Un Certain Regard, which is sort of the second tier, I guess, at least in the festival's mind.
But I
So
don't believe David Lynch is going to be there.
no, oh yeah. So I was like tangentially following that, but can you like catch people up who might not be familiar with that reference?
Yeah, so there is a guy online who generally likes to. He's a little bit of a gossip guy, and he drew up some gossip that he had heard that David Lynch was going to have a new project at the Cannes Film Festival, and then like David Lynch like responded in like four different interviews and like his weather reports that he did not have a project at the festival, and I guess I hope David Lynch wasn't too frustrated about it, but yeah, I guess people were a little disappointed.
I'm sure they were. He's one of those truly iconic filmmakers or television show makers now. That if you think he's going to be having a big new project debut at the world's most prestigious film festival, you're excited, and that would be disappointing. But there's not really anything disappointing about the competition, at least, right?
Right. I mean, this is the 75th edition of the
Oh,
festival. And John, you and I used to do like whole episodes
yeah,
dedicated to the festival. I
we
mean, we're going to
did.
tone that down quite a bit this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Uh,
sure we'll talk about it as it's unfolding or afterwards, and to talk about some of the movies we're excited about or ones that disappointed, but not in the same kind of way that we previously did. But yeah, it's something that's I think close to our hearts a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like to make a joke maybe annually that I was anticipating the announcements for the films that I won't be able to see for 6 months.
I know that does end up being the case like way too often. Uh, I did think, are there any? I think the Cronenberg is going to premiere like very shortly
Yeah, in
after, right?
June.
Or release rather, not premiere. So that's something at least. Hopefully, it's good. Well, what are some of the other titles that you're super jazzed about?
Yeah, you mentioned the Cronenberg movie has a trailer. I am personally looking forward to the new film from Coriata. Like if you've listened to this podcast at
Yeah.
all, I love his work. His new film Broker has a teaser trailer out there, and he has like frequent Bong Joon Ho collaborator song working with him,
Okay.
and that looks it looks right up his alley. That he what he typically is doing. Another director I'm always anticipating his work is Ruben Östlund, and we've known about Triangle of Sadness for a while. It was delayed, like many other films, due to COVID, but it's
Hmm.
finally ready. Looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
John, did you go through the list? Did you find other ones that you were particularly excited about?
I did, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's a lot that I'm like curious about. I wouldn't say that there's anything where I'm just like, holy shit, I can't wait for that. But I think we've talked about him a little bit over the years on the podcast as James Gray as a filmmaker I really like.
That's the
Um,
one I thought you'd say. Is
yeah, I figured you probably I mean, and I
I
would have
know
guessed
you,
Creator
yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Armageddon
yeah, I
Time
really
is
like
that movie.
James Gray. His movie's Armageddon Time. I think it's supposed to be uh, uh, closer to his earlier work, like I guess The Yards and some of those more personal movies than like an Ad Astra, which I guess still had certain themes that were prevalent in some of his other movies, but was bigger in scale and obviously set in the outer reaches of space. But excited about that. I mean, Kelly Reichert. We did an episode about her. I think right around the start of the pandemic, when First Cow was coming out, and she's a filmmaker I like a lot. I'm happy to see her in Competition, which seems like probably overdue. And then the other one that kind of jumped out at me was Decision to Leave, which is directed by Park Chan Wook, who is a filmmaker I don't know probably as well as I should, but everything I've seen of his, I'm really into. So,
Yeah,
some of the
he's
movies,
of Old Boy and Handmaiden
yeah,
fame.
yeah, that was the one. His most recent one was, I thought, really exceptional. The Handmaiden, Stoker, I thought was also very good. Haven't seen some of his older works besides Old Boy, but yeah, I'm curious about that movie. So we'll see. I mean, my wish with this always is that there's a filmmaker or two who I really wasn't as familiar with, who I kind of walk away from the festival. I mean, walk away as in turn my computer off and walk away. Where I'm just like, oh, okay, that's an interesting filmmaker. I'll look forward to his or her future works, and then when the festival in a couple of years pops up, it's like, oh, look, there's a new whatever movie. So we'll see. Hopefully there's some things that we're less familiar with that are going to jump up and surprise us. But there's some other titles that I know, excited about outside of the competition. Probably the biggest is the George Miller movie, 3,000 Years of Longing. Not really sure why it's not in competition, but we'll get a sense of, I guess, what's cooking with that movie, which I'm excited about. To a lesser extent, Top Gun Maverick, I've been anticipating for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we know what to expect from that.
Yeah, basically. But I guess the weirdest thing that I was not anticipating whatsoever is this Jerry Lee Lewis documentary, I believe, directed by just Ethan Cohen.
Yeah.
So this is now, roughly 5 or 6 months after the tragedy of Macbeth, directed only by Joel Cohen, and now here's a Ethan Cohen exclusive. And I was just kind of curious as to why why did he not want to do Macbeth and why did he want to do this instead, or vice versa, and what these guys are up to. It's always kind of,
Maybe we'll get double Cohen brother film output then.
I mean, that's not upsetting to me, although I would say that there was something particularly un-Cohen like about the tragedy of Macbeth, although I did find that film interesting. And then this is I think their first foray, or either of their first forays into making a doc. So whatever, they're stretching their limits, I guess, and we'll see how that goes.
So, John, before we transition into our main topic this weekend, there is actually a second movie coming out that has been receiving raves, and you told me you wouldn't see it because you're done with director Edgar's over here.
Oh yeah,
Do
I
you,
am.
you're even with the good reviews, you're not going to see the Northman.
0% chance.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I couldn't be less interested in that movie. I mean, it's not like The Lighthouse didn't get good reviews.
Yeah, less good, but
Yeah, I just, it just doesn't look like something I'm going to have any enjoyment watching whatsoever. I just sort of know
HBO
myself.
Max, HBO Max.
No, I'm never ever in a zillion years going to watch it. Yeah. I mean, it makes me sad to say that about a movie or director who, like, his first movie was on my top 10 list of that year and I really still love. And then and it wasn't like, The Lighthouse I thought was really bad. I really didn't like it at all. It's more just like he's like going so far down the rabbit holes of these like historical stuff, and it's just like I sort of like The Witch in spite of that, I think, and I'm just like and this one I think is going to be like especially brutal, and I don't know, I just like life's too short to just watch things I know I'm going to hate. So that's me. I'm just a I'm a bit of a sour fella, I guess, on some of these movies, but others, like we'll get to, I'm just going to be jubilant. We forgot to mention not just David Lynch is not appearing at Cannes, but neither is Buzz Lightyear.
Right. Yes.
But yeah. Anything else before we switch over to our main feature?
Um. Well, I know we normally like pick our movies just based on like the winners, and I
Oh
don't
yeah,
know if
yeah.
you're
Do you
gonna
want
like.
to?
Yeah, I don't know if like we're gonna like do another show before like the competition starts and like the the big waves start coming. So,
Let's pick something.
all right. Well, I'll pick the Kelly Reichardt to win.
Okay. Who's the jury president? Do we know that?
They haven't announced yet. They wanted the A Hero director
Oh,
for Hardy,
Farhadi.
but
Yeah.
due to his like lawsuit, they're like,
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I guess. Don't have any opinions. I don't know anything about that besides that there's a lawsuit going on. I'm going to go with Arno Despelchin movie, Faire et Sur.
great.
Perfect. One of these years we'll get it right, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think we still go back, right? The Xavier Dolan year was probably the
Yes,
closest.
the movie that was one of the most hated ever, I think, in Cannes in the years at least of us doing this. It was a runner-up, basically, and
Right.
that I had picked. I think I had picked it. Maybe
And
you did. I can't
and
remember.
just so our audience knows, we have no idea about the quality of these movies. We haven't seen
Oh no, but
anything.
yeah. No,
We're just going by the directors and the titles. And
exactly. Yeah. What do we know about them? What do we know about the film? Maybe nothing. What do we know about the jury? Especially nothing this year. So it's a as informed opinion as ever. Um, So, okay, cool. So we're going to talk for our main feature about an actor I think we both enjoy at the very least, right? Nicolas Cage. Or is he going by Nick Cage now?
I don't know. I think like he is Nicolas Cage, but on like the posters for his new movie, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, he is going by Nick Cage.
Interesting. I wonder what that's about.
He was originally born Nicholas Coppola,
Yeah,
so
Nicholas Kim Coppola.
so yeah. And John, to answer your question, Nicolas Cage hasn't been one of my favorites.
He's not. But do you enjoy him?
I after this exercise, I do more so.
Okay. So let's unpack that a little bit. So what's sort of your oh well, I guess before we get into that, but one of the reasons why we wanted to discuss Nick Cage slash Nicolas Cage is you mentioned already The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is his newest movie, right? And that came out this week.
Right?
And there's also a new book about him and his career that is being released. That is written by Keith Phipps.
Yes, called Age of Cage.
Right. So with that all out of the way, what's kind of your relationship to Cage and his movies, and why do you have, I would say, a mixed at best opinion of him, and that's maybe leaning slightly positive now?
Yeah, so I don't know, like my kind of knowledge of Cage growing up was this guy who was kind of like off the wall and like appearing in movies that I didn't necessarily have a big drive to see. He was never really a selling point for me to see a movie. I kind of found him in kind of off putting in the same way maybe people find William Dafoe off putting, but um, I just didn't need to see Nicolas Cage movies. And I think when I first saw Adaptation, which I believe is one movie that you're going to talk about later,
Uh-huh.
um, I really appreciate him in that movie. And so that made me like say, oh well, maybe there's more to Nicolas Cage than what I thought. And then he goes on to do other movies like Ghost Rider and Wicker Man and what have you. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. And I guess I just never jumped on the Nicolas Cage bandwagon or even a fan of his in general. And then when last year when Pig came out, I caught that and they're like, "Oh, Nicolas Cage gives a great performance." I was like, "Is Nicolas Cage capable of a great performance?" And like, I just wasn't that aware of his work, and yeah, he's fantastic in Pig, and um, certainly made me much more interested in his career. Um, I haven't seen too many of his movies, but other
There's a
than the
lot of
two,
them, to be
yeah,
fair.
yeah, outside the two that I'm going to mention tonight, I've also seen
I mean,
Moonstruck. That's right, and
yeah,
I really like him in that. And even though he's playing like a heightened, really exaggerated performance, I really like him in
that's sort of what he does,
that.
for better or worse. And I would say for me, it was more. I guess I was always something of a Cage fan. Like, I know that he has a lot of, not so great movies in his filmography. But I just always tended to just skip those. He was never somebody who was like, oh, there's a new Cage movie. I have to go see it. Like, it was more, I'm going to see the movie anyway because it has good reviews or it has other things that are interesting to me. And if he's in it and, it's typically like if he's in a movie, and it gets really good reviews, like he's not like shitty in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I sort of, I guess, avoided a lot of the things that would have, like you mentioned, the Ghost Riders and Wicker Mans of it all. Like, I never bothered to see those movies because they were supposedly not very good. But then I would come back around to it when he has Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans. I'm like, okay, I'm going to see this movie because it sounds interesting and not because like I have to see the new Cage movie and that one's fun. Or Kick Ass, which I saw when it came out, as it was like a kind of a fun, I guess, ironic looking superhero movie. And he happens to be really fun in it, and kind of playing off of his persona a little bit. And then I'll skip The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Thank you very much. So that's sort of been it for me. It was more just like seeing the good movies and avoiding the bad ones. And as a result, I would say, I haven't seen a Cage movie in quite some time. I'm a little bit curious about, well, Pig being an exception, obviously, like you mentioned, kind of coming out of nowhere. And then The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent being this new one, which kind of is I haven't seen it. Have you seen it? I can't remember.
no, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
It's played at South by Southwest to pretty favorable reviews, and
right. Yeah,
generally, I imagine that if you're a Nicolas Cage fan, that you're going to get even more out of it due to its um, signals to his career.
totally, totally. So that's about it. We'll talk about a couple movies that we've either watched recently or just have some strong, feelings for one way or another. But why don't you get us started there?
All right, so I watched a movie that I actually avoided for a long time because I thought it was going to be like graphic for some reason.
Uh-huh.
And that is the 90s movie Face Off
Oh, okay, yeah.
with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. And like I thought like there'd be like this like wicked graphic like face surgery scene, and let's face it, there's a 3-minute face surgery scene, but
Uh,
it's not bad. What is on the other ends of that is a John Woo action film through and through.
yeah.
I thank my watching stuff like Hard Boiled and Mission Impossible 2 for some experience with John Woo.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough.
And this has many of the same story elements, or at least a lot of his same trademarks. You know, like I guess Nicolas Cage jumps out of a plane sideways with 2 pistols, and like that's like an iconic jump for his John Woo's action stars, or I guess all the doves. There's like doves in a church or something near the end of Face Off. But what I really love about the movie, and I'll get to the point of like maybe I don't necessarily love the movie itself, but the concept that I love is that the movie starts um, pretty pretty fast, and like you have uh, Travolta trying to he's like a cop, and he's well a little bit higher. Let's say he's like FBI or CIA, and he's been trying to track down Nicolas Cage for 5 years, not just because he's a wanted villain, but because he also killed Travolta's son. And they end up finally catching Nicolas Cage, but they find out that the only way to stop a bomb from happening is if they can convince Nicolas Cage's brother to tell them where the bomb is, because Nicolas Cage probably won't recover. And so to do this, they've decided that the 2 men will swap bodies, or rather, like swap faces, right? And they're like, "Oh, this is the way to do it." Really ridiculous. And so they go ahead and do that. But when they do that, then you have Nicolas Cage is essentially the good guy because he's now playing the John Travolta character, and then John Travolta gets to be like the villain for this movie. So that was like a really fun like change of the actors,
Yeah.
because like Travolta's always been known as like the hero, right? I mean, in Pulp Fiction, he has a little bit of like not
More of
being
an
the hero,
anti-hero. Yeah.
yeah, but he's still likable in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, very much so.
But then you have Nicolas Cage, who I guess isn't really well known for being likable, and he has to play this like this part here, and
Yeah.
I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've never actually seen it either, and I'm not really sure why, because it seems like something I would enjoy. But yeah, it sounds like a very fun premise, and people really get. I think yeah, there's a lot of mileage out of the face slash off entire structure of the title, and how literal some that ends up being and whatnot. But that's cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. 2 guys that I think I guess I should say Travolta being another guy that you probably get a interesting book or meta movie or podcast episode out of his career and filmography, and how weird that one is too. But that's good. Yeah. I watched another movie from roughly the same period. I am trying to see real quick. Face Off was 97, and then the movie I watched, Snake Eyes, was 1998. So just a year later. And Snake Eyes was something I've wanted to see for a long time, because I really love Brian De Palma as the director, and he did Snake Eyes. This was not one of De Palma's more acclaimed movies, and I think what I knew of it was that there's like a big long tracking shot early in the movie at like a boxing match in Atlantic City, and that's fairly well known and I think acclaimed. And then outside of that, it's sort of supposedly the movie kind of falls off significantly, and Cage is doing big manic Cage things as this sort of crooked cop named Rick Santoro.
Is that
And
what you've heard, or is that what you can now confirm?
that's what I heard. I would say, I mean, I enjoyed the movie a lot,
Okay.
but it is so very, very, very much up my alley. And, I was reading more about it afterwards, and a lot of people saying, like, if this is your thing, it's your thing. You're probably going to love it. But, for me, it was just okay. And I was like, no, it was my thing. And I really liked it. It's just total pure De Palma of like military industrial complex, and who's screwing who, literally and figuratively in this case. And everybody's got a hidden agenda. And this really felt like it was kind of like a play off of like a Rashomon, where you're seeing there's this crime. It's an assassination that takes place at the boxing match, and you end up sort of seeing everything transpiring through multiple perspectives over the course of the movie. And you're with the sort of hero, I guess, but again, it's more of an anti-hero, as we talked about with Travolta in Pulp Fiction, where he's not really a good guy, but you're hoping he figures this out, and he's kind of piecing it all together with you. So I thought it was fun. It definitely, like, the ending is a little bit convoluted. I mean, a little bit. It was really convoluted, but in a way that, like, I was just like, okay, like, like, I don't think that it's unaware of that. And it's just sort of like kind of going and trying to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And I admire like those sort of swings. It's like a very not dull movie. And the performance from Cage is very not dull also. Like, he is really going for it. And some of this, this sort of just the way he's like owning his space, and it's a big set, in this arena with thousands of people presumably, is admirable, and sometimes a little bit much. It's very much a movie. It's not, I don't think it doesn't for a second feel like it's set in the real world. But so I think it all kind of fits. Like, it's surprising to me in hindsight, for a lot of reasons, that like he only ever did this one, I think, De Palma movie, because they're so like, if I could describe Nicolas Cage's acting style as a director, I might say Brian De Palma, because it's just so like showy and over the top, but effective sometimes and sometimes not at all. And I would also add to that, like, Cage is a Coppola, right? And like, Coppola and De Palma were contemporaries, coming up in the 70s together. So it's kind of weird that this was the only time they made a movie, and that, most people, I would say, feel like it's a flop. But I really liked watching it, and I would definitely watch it again.
Now, you said like the opening tracking shot is pretty impressive.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think I read it was 13 minutes, and I think you could see some obvious places where it's probably cut, but he's like going like throughout the entire arena, from like the boxing floor, like right outside the ring with all the people, to backstage, to up the escalator, down the escalator, like checking out this guy, that guy. There's like a sort of chasing really briefly a bad guy, I guess you can say. And yeah, so there's just a lot happening, but it was very cool to watch.
As like a small tangent, do you think like the art of like the tracking shot has been kind of lost because like we have all these digital tools to like make it easier?
It's a good question. I feel like we see them like more frequently now. I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends on the movie, I guess. Like, for a while it seemed like they were really prevalent, and that kind of all built up to like Birdman, right?
Right.
Where it's like, we're going to do a whole movie that's a tracking shot. And really, that was like something that turned me off to tracking shots, because I'm just like, this was so obtrusive, this like way of making this movie. But like, when it's done right, I'm just like, this is so fun. Like, this, what a clever like way to do this. And I could think of a bunch like off the top of my head, this being one of them. And it's just like, it works. It didn't take me out of the movie. I just felt like I was getting like a really good sense of the geography, and the character and Cage like are asked to do so many different things over the course of the shot, which just impressed me all the more. But like, there's a handful of others over the last like 10 years or so that I think are really good. Like, I can think of Atonement, and there's one that's like on the beaches during World War II, and I think it's at Dunkirk. Really, that was really, really well done. And now they're kind of failing to come to me. Oh, Children of Men is one of the all-time great movies, I think, but it has two, I think, really, really long ones through like an active war scene. That was the Alfonso Cuarón movie from the mid 2000s. But yeah, you're probably right. Like, it does make it easier to do them. I also think that movies are just kind of like, I talked about this when I watched Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, it just feels like they're not interested in that kind of artistry anymore. It's more just everything's green screened and you're just trying to, like, you know, kind of get through this as quickly as you can. And it's choppier and it just doesn't look as good. There's not as much care being put into that.
Sure, I've seen scenes clips that weren't so flattering of Marvel movies, where it's just like, oh, the actor's just sitting like on a blank green screen set, and it looks like they're like in a restaurant right behind them, and it's just
Yeah, well,
like,
that was the Spider-Man movie where him and Happy go to the cemetery, and they said they green screened like a cemetery in the background. It's like, really? They couldn't find one to just go to for a minute? Um, but yeah, I know that's a tangent. I thought this was effective and fun, and it really kind of, I think, by starting the movie off that way, it gives you just like a real good way to sink your teeth into it.
all right, good. Most of the movies we picked, John, I see is the '90s Cage output, and
Yeah.
he has been working for many decades, right?
Yeah, I mean, going back to like the early '80s, it looks like when he popped up in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. From the '80s, like we didn't talk about any of these movies, but like you mentioned Moonstruck, I think he's really great in that. Right before that, he made Raising Arizona, which I think was, a huge movie for him and for Holly Hunter and for the Coen brothers. It was their second movie. He's really fantastic in it. Have you ever seen that movie?
I've seen it once a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one that's I think he's really good at, and it's just like it's a different Nicolas Cage type performance because he's just so funny. But I think that's really good. Some others from like the late '80s, early '90s that I'm less familiar with, but Wild at Heart was we mentioned him earlier, David Lynch movie he did, that I think a lot of people really like. I haven't seen it. Um, what else we have
Do
here?
you have
Oh, he did
The
Peggy Sue Got
Raw,
Married.
Con
The
Air?
those are kind of those are
Yeah.
really kind of I think firmly in the mid '90s, late '90s vein where he started to do action stuff in between some higher profile, dramas or comedies or whatever. But yeah, he's been doing it for a long time.
Very successful guy. Um, the one movie that he did, which he won a Best Actor Oscar for, was this extremely low budget movie called Leaving Las Vegas.
Right.
John, do you know anything about this movie?
I'm familiar with it. I've never seen it, but I kind of know what it's about, and that it was a long shot, let's say, to have the success it did.
Yeah, it's not a very pleasant watch.
Right. Yeah.
um, John, let me tell you, have you ever wanted to see a movie where Nicolas Cage plays an alcoholic who's trying to drink himself to death, who finds like codependence with a prostitute played by Elizabeth Shue, who is so broken due to prostitution that she thinks that the only way that she can have a meaningful relationship is to live with this drunk man.
It sounds tough.
It is a tough movie. Would it be even tougher if I told you that the guy who wrote the book, after he sold the rights to the movie, he committed suicide, and
Oh,
most people think like the book was like his like last thing to the world or something like that.
dang, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's a heavy movie. So, the first like 18 minutes is just like we see Nicolas Cage like completely destroyed by his alcoholism. Um, we see him like try to go cash checks and stuff like that, and he if he hasn't had a drink, he can't be steady. He is like that far in. Um, and you get like short glimpses of it where like you see that maybe his family left him or he lost his family somehow, he lost his job, whether or not that was before or after his alcoholism, I'm not sure, but he loses his job and he decides he's going to go to Vegas. And we learned later his reasoning for going to Vegas is because when he needed more alcohol, he in LA he found out that place is closed and he needed to go to a place that had alcohol available all the time. So on his way to Vegas, we get the closest thing to a meet cute, I guess this movie's ever going to get, where he's kind of unaware at the wheel and he almost runs over Elizabeth Shue, who's out in the streets working, and she's like, "Oh, you almost ran me over, and watch where you're going, asshole," pretty much, and like flips him the bird, and it's not till later that they meet up again, happenstance, and begin this codependent relationship. And it might be easy to put a label on it and say like, oh, here's like this romance between the two of them. And while they definitely feel like they were in love, it's hard to like say that it's really romantic in any way. Obviously, there comes a time where Nicolas Cage's character agrees that he's going to move in with Elizabeth Shue because she insists that he doesn't stay in a motel rather, and he's like, the one condition is that you can never ask me to stop drinking. So it's like she has to realize that he's not going to be here forever. He's going to drink himself to death, and whatever time they have is just going to be that. And it's a bizarre movie. I guess it was filmed in 16 millimeter because I said it was like really low budget. I want to use better words than interesting, John. I want to say that the performances by Nicolas Cage and Elizabeth Shue are the reason to watch the movie, obviously, and both were nominated. Cage won the Oscar, and I looked up his Oscar speech because I was interested what he'd say when he got there, and it really even enamored me to him a little bit more. And he's just like on the stage and he's like, I just love acting, and
That's
it's
cool.
just cool that this guy who's been doing it so long
Yeah,
just
seriously.
really loves his craft. As far as like whether or not I'd recommend the movie, it's tough because I didn't really love it. I mean, it's not exactly something that everyone would want to sit down and watch.
Is there something that you'd like compare it to?
I don't know, but John, I've been watching a lot of movies where people have like alcoholism problems lately, and I
Yeah,
just like need a break from that.
fair enough.
Because I was watching like this other like movie, this pre-code movie on Criterion Channel called "Merrily We All Go to Hell,"
Oh
and
yeah,
like yeah, and the lead in that like has an alcohol problem,
yeah.
and I'm just like, I need to stop watching these movies for a little bit.
uh,
But
yeah, that's tough. That's tough stuff.
but yeah, I guess if you want to hear some, I guess Sting provides some vocals on some like jazz tracks. And I was like, this is weird. I'm like, how did they get Sting to like? It's like, yeah, sure, I'll provide my voice on some jazz standards for your movie.
Yeah, I don't know.
Uh,
I guess there's some good vibes coming because he picked right.
yeah, I guess so.
So I watched. This was not a first watch for me. I've seen adaptation many times, but it does feel like to me like the best. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it's the best Nicolas Cage performance, if it's just the most acting he has to do in a movie, or if maybe it's the best movie that I think Nicolas Cage has been in. Not really sure, but it feels like it's one of those things. I do love adaptation. I think he's excellent in it. And of course, he plays two roles. So there's a lot of Cage going on here. But if you're unfamiliar, this is a 2002 movie that was directed by Spike Jonze and is written by Charlie Kaufman. And it is Nicolas Cage's playing Charlie Kaufman. It's a very meta movie. It's basically Charlie Kaufman telling the real story of him trying to adapt a book called The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean, and him being unable to do so, and sort of talking about just what it's like to be struggling as a writer. He has a fictitious twin brother in the movie called Donald Kaufman, who is a very enthusiastic, aspiring writer, even though he's not particularly good. But yeah, the movie kind of cuts back and forth between him trying to do this and the actual story of the Orchid Thief, which is who is a character played by Chris Cooper. Cooper won an Oscar for this movie for Best Supporting Actor, and Susan Orlean in the movie is played by Meryl Streep. So you've seen Adaptation, right?
Yeah, a few times.
Yeah. So it's really really good. It is really like a tough movie to, I think, kind of wrap your head around if you're seeing it for the first time and you're kind of not familiar with what is going on, because it is so uh, just unusual. Like I think at the time I had never seen anything like it, and I think it was. I mean, I was young. I saw this not in theaters, but I saw it when it came out on video, I guess you could say, at the time. And I found it a little bit like out there and off-putting, but I've seen it since now a bunch of times and really appreciate it. I really just love the interplay between Charlie and Donald. It's maybe my favorite thing about the movie, and there's a lot of good stuff to love. But having this like really just enthusiastic and happy-go-lucky guy kind of constantly setting the main character off in a spiral of anxiety feels like, I mean, it's fun to see it play out as like two different people, because it feels like it's two halves of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so just kind of seeing them war with each other, and one of them really wants to kill the other and the other one doesn't, because he loves his brother and he just wants him to be happy like him, is very fun. I also think Meryl Streep is really good in this movie. It's like right before she kind of like took over big adult movie making, and I don't think she would make a movie like this again. But back in 2002, I guess she was making more unique choices, and I think she's great in it. But
Yeah, I particularly like the scene where she was like high on the phone with Chris
yeah,
Cooper.
it's
And
so great, so memorable. Yeah, she's doing the dial tone thing.
yeah. I
So
mean,
yeah.
that's highly appropriate. We're recording on 420 here, and
Oh, it's true. Yeah, good point. Good point.
uh,
Um, so yeah, I think it's a very fun movie. If you haven't seen it, Spike Jonze did a sort of back to back. This was his follow up to Being John Malkovich, which he made with Charlie Kaufman also. And then what did he do after? I mean, he did Her a while
yeah,
after this,
he hasn't done anything since Her, I think.
just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But in between there, he also did Where the Wild Things Are. And that's it. That's his like filmography, a feature filmography as a director. And then of course Charlie Kaufman would go on and he directed that. What was the movie he made last year? Do you remember? Or a couple years ago?
Yeah, it's the
I'm thinking of
Netflix.
Ending Things. I'm thinking of Ending Things.
Jesse Plemons and
Yep. Yeah.
Jesse
And
Buckley, the two Jessies.
Sure. The Jessies, the Jesse movie. So yeah, I really liked Adaptation. I would say of the Nicolas Cage movies I've seen, it's probably his best performance, just because it's like he seems just perfect for it. It's he gets to do a lot of things. It's not a subtle movie by any stretch of the imagination, and it's very well done, and he kind of fits right in, which isn't an easy thing to do. He can dominate things a lot,
Yeah, and it's funny because it in a way it's some parts like Tree of Life, because it's like a lot of talk about like evolution in it, because like that's how.
Oh yeah, totally.
That like trying, it's like you could see like Charlie Kaufman like trying to like whittle away like how to make this book into a movie, and what he's ultimately done is like, I don't know, built a movie around a movie.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'm like not sure about, I've never like done the deep dive or as deep a dive as I probably needed to on this movie, but like how much of this was him like actually struggling to adapt this thing, or was it just like, hey, like maybe I'll try this and see if they go for it, and they somehow did.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be
I don't.
weird.
I'm not sure,
I
but
think
whatever it is, it works.
I think one time like eventually made me like buy the novel The Orchid Thief, but like then I realized it wasn't anything like the
It's not an
movie.
adaptation. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was like, I'm not gonna read this.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I would say that's probably his best performance for me. Um, I Are there any like other Cage movies or performances that you wanted to kind of shout out that we didn't get a chance to discuss in too much detail?
No, I think I mentioned the ones that I particularly love, like Moonstruck and Pig, and I can now appreciate Leaving Las Vegas, and
Sure, yeah.
um, I am more interested to see a few more his movies. I think Con Air is one that I'm looking forward to turning
Con Air
on.
was yeah. It's funny you say that because I was in a hotel last weekend and flipping through cable, and Con Air was on one of the channels. I was like, oh, maybe I'll watch Con Air, and then I just went one channel up and it was Titanic, and I was like, sorry, Con Air. But yeah, that's a fun movie.
No, I just don't think that I'm going to watch The Rock because I'm like we've discussed many times. I'm not a Michael Bay fan,
I
so.
know, but The Rock is great. The
But
Rock is
is it
great.
great because he's in it, or does he play like such a supporting role that like
He's not like I'm not like oh my gosh like Nicolas Cage is so great in The Rock. Like that movie would not
right
work without him. Like I think it's just a well-made action movie, and I would say Connery is probably more the you know
driving force behind the movie?
appeal of from the acting side, and then just the presence.
Yeah, I think one of my other things about picking Cage movies to visit for this exercise was to pick things that he was really the actor forefront and center, and
That makes sense.
not just like a
Yeah,
supporting.
yeah. I thought about watching The Rock too, and I thought that didn't seem quite right. And Pig was newer. I think Pig is really probably one of his better movies. And one that I would have, if I had more time, I might have enjoyed to revisit was Bad Lieutenant. Which have you ever seen that?
No.
Yeah, that's really really good. And he's fantastic in it. Again, it's just a movie that like totally plays like right into his strengths.
All right. Well, you have anything else on Nicolas Cage or?
No, I'm glad we got to do this. This was a fun idea for an episode, and we'll see what the new movie has to offer. And if you want to check out the book, I haven't read the whole thing, but I've enjoyed what I've read so far. It's got a lot of great details about I was kind of taking a look at some of the sections that cover the movies that I've seen or that we want to talk about, and I thought it was an interesting read. So check both those out as well as whatever Nicolas Cage movies excite you, and have a good Nick Cage April.
Yeah, I mean, like he has so many movies that we discussed. I mean, if you just plug into like just watch and like try to find some movies, I'm sure you'll find some on some streaming services and have a good
It
time.
can't be that hard, yeah. Okay, cool. So we're going to I guess switch over to what we've been watching. But before we do that, we can let you know how to follow us. On Twitter, I am no longer there, as I told Max offline. So if you want to get a hold of me on social media, you'll have to go through the podcast, which I'll share how you can do that shortly. But you can also check out my other podcast if you're still inclined, which is called There Will Be Pod. But Max, on Twitter, you're at
MH Colville.
and our podcast is at It's the Pick Pod, and we're also on Facebook at It's the Pictures. And on you can send us an email at it's the pictures at gmail.com with your favorite Nick Cage performance or your prediction for the Palm Doric on Sight Unseen. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcatching app. While you're there, please leave us a review. 5 stars will help other people discover and enjoy the show. Additionally, we are on Letterboxd. Just search for It's the Pictures, and you can see what we've been watching lately, including The Batman and We're All Going to the World's Fair, which we're going to talk about shortly. And Max, you watch Everything Everywhere All the Time, which you wrote about on our Substack at itsthepictures.substack.com. What else do you want to talk about newsletter related?
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, like that review is up. I have some other reviews coming. It's been a bit slower there. I did a review for Pace Magazine at the beginning of the month for a new movie that's coming out at the end of the month. The end of the month being April, called Bubble. It's a Netflix exclusive anime film.
Right.
If you want to check out that review or check out the film, it's coming out, I think, April 28th or 26th. You can check that out.
Cool. I know you had been, or maybe still are, writing a lot about TV on the um, newsletter. I'm not all the way caught up yet, but I have watched more Winning Time, and I'm starting to enjoy it a little bit more than I did the first episode or two.
Okay.
So that's cool. And then, have you watched or written about Severance?
I haven't written or what. I watched the first episode, but it's actually come up a lot on our podcast because people seem to enjoy it a lot.
It's probably the best show I've seen in, I mean, Succession's hard to beat, but Severance is like right up there. I really, really thought it was great, and I think you'll love it. So,
Well,
can't,
John, I did just pretty much binge Bridgerton season 2 with Shannon, and she loved it. I mean, I thought it was good.
I never saw any of that.
It's you know it's
Caitlin watched the first season.
yeah, it's a period romance show.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary, but as far as they go, it's well done.
I also watched The Ultimatum on Netflix.
Oh, yes, I think Rebecca mentioned that last time.
Okay.
She was also mentioning like she enjoys Australian Survivor or something.
Oh my God! Well, we have to have her back on because I have a lot of thoughts on that. My goodness gracious!
Yeah, I was like, oh, John would have loved to talk to you about this.
I really would have. That's great. Very funny. Okay, cool. So that's everything for us. Let's do a quick what we've been watching. I'll go first if you don't mind.
Sure.
I finally caught up with The Batman,
which I'm sure a lot of other people are now.
Yeah, I guess so, right? So I saw this had dropped finally on HBO Max. I missed it in theaters, as I seem to with most everything nowadays. But thankfully, it was a Warner Brothers movie, so it went to HBO Max after, I think, 45 days. And, I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. I was shocked at how much I loved it. I found it so well done. I was totally just unsettled the whole time by not just like the plot of the movie and the way it's, the acting is and the music and everything, but just like I was unsettled by like how little it got into like just the world and like and what why Batman is, it's just so, it seems so uninterested in all that, and I just really admire all that. So yeah, it was, but it's a long movie. We joked about that a little bit earlier. It's 3 hours, so it takes some time, and I think it's not. I don't know. I haven't kept up with like the general feelings toward it, but my guess is that some people are going to watch it and be disappointed and kind of turned off by the way they approach this. Am I right on that?
I think the
like general public people, like I think movie people are going to be really into it.
No, I think generally it had good thoughts, or people had good opinion on it. I think I talked about it briefly when I saw it, and I was just like, I miss the cinematic experience that Christopher Nolan brought to the franchise.
I do too. I mean, like, I think that's kind of what I meant, like, where it's such a divergent, movie from that. And I, at first, was just sort of like, oh gosh, like, I hope this sort of brightens up a little bit and that we can have something that's like, a conversation that's like outside of the context of this particular plot because it's so like dense. But after a while, I just sort of was going with it, and I was like, okay, actually, this is like really cool.
Yeah, and like I can appreciate that he went so far in a different direction because that way he could make it different, right? Because
yeah,
there's been plenty of Batman movies.
yeah, 100%.
So if you want to make your mark on the franchise and stuff like that, you need to take a swing in another direction. And we're gonna go hard and make this like, real believable and hardcore.
It's basically like Seven, yeah.
Yeah. This decided to go, like tap into Batman's detective roots, even though I don't particularly think that this Batman was a particularly good detective.
No,
Uh,
not especially, I guess, right?
how they used him, and it almost like, whereas they were playing up Ben Affleck being the old Batman when he was briefly in the role. Now they're playing up Robert Pattinson as being the young Batman, and it almost like seems like he's inexperienced in his suit and in his world, even though it's not exactly a full origin story. Thankfully, that they spare us from some of that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I guess, yeah, I didn't need to see like, yeah, I agree. We didn't need all of that again, but it was a little bit disorienting to be dropped into the middle of a new Batman movie in a very, very different Gotham City with new characters, including a new Batman, and just say go, So I guess that was the thing that kind of shook me in a good way ultimately. But at first, I was just sort of like, I don't know if I'm on the same wavelength as this movie, and it just took me a little while to get there. And once I did, I was really hooked into it. So,
I think people were very happy that like it had like a lot of sex appeal, they had they like the chemistry between Pattinson and Kravitz, and
sure,
a lot. The biggest complaint against Marvel movies is that they've become like kind of stoic, and
yeah,
there's not like a lot of like chemistry between the cast.
no, there's
And
not.
and
Besides Chris Evans and Anthony Mackie.
so it's nice to have these actors play off each other. I think like the most egregious section for me, even though like I still think the scene is pretty impressive, is the Batmobile sequence, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, it feels like they just brought the Batmobile into the movie so they could sell it as a toy.
Maybe
Um,
that was a note.
yeah, because like he doesn't he's a Batman who doesn't like the Batmobile, right? You see him like on his motorcycle a lot in this
uh-huh.
movie, and like
Uh-huh.
it seems like that's what he prefers. And maybe it makes more sense if you're a guy who likes to be like kind of stealthy, um, to ride a small little motorcycle as opposed to this big honking car.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I get it. I thought it was. I just thought it was really good. I really liked it a lot.
What
What
did you think?
way?
What did you think
Yeah,
about having to bring that character back into this movie?
yeah. I don't love it. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, like it's been all over social media and stuff like that, so it's not that
Right.
big
I
of a
think you can
spoiler.
probably
But
say it, but
yeah, but I don't know. It's like some people are like give that character a rest, and
that would be fine with me.
because Batman is my two favorite comic book heroes, and it's not a surprise that they're the most popular is Spider Man and Batman, and
Uh-huh.
it's because of their rogues gallery and like all the
Yeah, yeah,
different
yeah.
villains that they have, and like how interesting those are.
I
And
guess the question I have is, was this again like, the studio saying you can have all the money you want for this, but the sequel has to have this guy in it?
yeah.
Or is it more Reeves as a director saying like, "Oh, I want my crack at it because it's just the most iconic, villain probably, or versus Darth Vader maybe ever."
Yeah, right. And
I can see it both ways, and it's understandable both ways. But I agree that it's just sort of like, yeah, like there's. I mean, I was super psyched just when this movie was kind of coming up that it was like, oh, cool, like a new Penguin and a new Riddler.
Riddler,
Like
yeah.
that sounds kind of fun. Those were two that got passed over completely by Nolan. So I was interested to see them kind of brought into the 21st century,
Yeah, and I like
and I thought they both worked.
I like the way that the Riddler's character is like brought into this world, right? He's like radicalizing people over the internet, which feels
I
very
mean, really, like it felt very jokery.
well. Yeah, that I mean, sometimes he does those like saw traps, like
Yeah, right.
the scenes, but
And kind of cult of personality.
Right. I thought that was pretty clever to tie it into like how people can manipulate people over the internet.
Yeah, no, I agree. Instead of it being, Jim Carrey's big brain drain
Yeah.
concoction of Batman Forever. Yeah, cool. Good stuff. What have you been watching?
Yeah, so in a totally different direction budget wise, I watched this movie that actually premiered in Sundance 2021, I believe. Yep, that makes sense. And at the time, I guess I had it slightly on my radar, but I just didn't get to it. But now it's taken all the way now to April 2022, and it's called "We're All Going to the World's Fair." When this episode goes up, probably on Friday or tomorrow Thursday, the movie will be available for rental on Friday, and it's playing in select theaters. Um, but it stars newcomer uh, Anna Cobb, and it's directed by Jane Schoenburn, and it's more about the internet, John. I mean, like I've seen like people refer to this genre as like creepy pasta, and I know vague amounts of what that is. Like, oh, here are these like online stories, almost like what Blair Witch was or Slender Man, I guess.
Okay.
And so in this movie, our protagonist, who's a teenage girl, she is participating in an online game, and the game is a horror game, and it's called "We're All Going to the World's Fair." And the idea is you do like this séance in front of your computer screen and recite some words, and you're supposed to be like almost like playing a real life RPG with like your results of this game, and it's supposed to be like a horror game, right? And she's really into horror, and you get a sense that like her family life isn't all that great. You don't see her parents very often, and she might be a little bit of a loner, and like she as like she gets more and more into this game, she's seeing like increasingly scarier videos and making weirder videos. And it's just like at the time, it's like you don't know how far it's going to get for her, how far she's going to go into this game, or even really acknowledge that it's a game anymore, or if she ever acknowledged it was make believe to begin with.
Yeah.
And it's just like I think it's not only a commentary on how people look for connections through the internet these days, and um, wanting that kind of attention and making videos and likes and things like that. That's just a very competitive need to be above other people
Yeah.
in that world, and that is additional pressure upon in addition to whatever home life you have. So yeah, I think it's a very entertaining. It's entertaining. It's moody, right? The music kind of reminded me of like the music that Twin Peaks has.
I've never seen Twin Peaks,
Well,
but
you've
that's
seen Mulholland
most people
Drive.
listening probably have.
Mulholland Drive, then you've seen that.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that.
Antonio Baldamini, I think, is the composer.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like moody like that, and yeah, like I said, definitely like low budget. Like most of the movie is either like in her room, like from her computer screen, or like she's looking at videos on the internet. And but I think it's very effective, even though it is a lower budget film, and it has a lot to say. And I I I recommend it. Yeah, John, it reminded me of this funny SNL video that came out a few weeks ago, and me saying funny and SNL in the same sentence is kind of, it's not always realistic. But
No.
I guess they made one that film Twitter could love, and it was called Short Ass Movie, and they were all rapping about like, oh, I love myself some movies that are under 90 minutes and stuff like that.
Well, you know my thoughts on that.
Yeah. And so this one is only an hour and 26 minutes. So if that is for you,
That's for me.
yeah, I would check out We're
They should
All
all
Going
be
to the
90
Wilshire.
minutes or 3 hours. That's my take. And sticking to it. Cool. Well, thanks for the recommendation, and hopefully people are able to seek that out. Not as big budget as the Batman, but so it is. And I guess that's going to do it for us tonight and this episode. You'll be happy to hear that the Celtics won by 7, Max.
Oh, great! I was looking online like while you were talking about like adaptation a little bit, and I was following it, and they were up 12. So I was like, oh, this is
The Celtics
optimistic.
were up 12.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. I mean, I wasn't really following super closely, but that's wild.
Yeah, they were up 12 at one point. Like Jason Tatum hit like a big shot, and the whole and the Garden was going crazy.
I can imagine. Very cool. But yeah, so that'll do it. Well, maybe by the time we record next, they'll be halfway through their second round matchup with Milwaukee, I think. So, but cool. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, bye.